A bride walks barefoot through a sunlit meadow, the day still warm with her wedding vows. 2 steps from her new husband, a snake strikes. She falls. He reaches her too late. From that moment, the music of Orpheus turns to something darker. This is the legend of Orpheus and Eurydice, the only true story of love that tried to follow death itself. By the end, you will understand why this myth has survived almost 3,000 years. In ancient Thrace, a wild forested land north of Greece, a boy was born with honey on his tongue. The 9 Muses, daughters of Memory herself, taught him the songs of the world. The god Apollo gave him a golden lyre that sang the moment his fingers touched the strings. Trees bent forward, rivers slowed, and even wild wolves lay down when he played. His name was Orpheus, and wherever he walked, the world grew quiet and a little more beautiful. Then, one bright morning, he met a nymph named Eurydice, and his music finally found a reason. Now let's begin properly, because what happened next changed music forever, and changed him too. Their wedding lit up the hills of Thrace, and for a while, even the gods looked down and smiled. But here is where the legend turns, and turns darker than any campfire tale you have heard. On the afternoon of the wedding, Eurydice walked among her friends in a sunlit meadow at the edge of the woods. A venomous snake, hidden in the long grass, struck her heel before anyone could cry out. She collapsed among the flowers, and by the time Orpheus reached her, her eyes had already closed. Hades, the god of the underworld, had claimed her soul, and her spirit slid quietly down into the dark. Orpheus held her body until the first stars came out, and then he made a vow no singer had ever made. He swore he would walk into the land of the dead and bring her back, or never play again. Now, here is where the legend turns mythic, and where, if you listen closely, your jaw will drop. The Greeks believed the underworld lay far beneath the earth, past the river Styx, the river of broken oaths. Past the gray fields of asphodel, where ordinary souls wandered like mist, the road kept winding downward forever. And at last, before the dark throne of Hades and Persephone, queen of the dead, every human journey ended. Orpheus walked into a cave at Taenarus, where the Greeks said the long path to hell began. The air grew colder with every step, and the daylight shrank to a thin gray thread behind him. But he kept his lyre close to his chest, and somewhere in the deep dark, he began to play. Now listen, this is the part the ancient poets could not stop retelling around their fires at night. His music carried down through the rock like sunlight slipping through deep water, patient, steady, grieving. The boatman Charon, who ferries the dead across the Styx, paused mid-stroke and listened to the song. Even the 3-headed dog Cerberus, the great guardian of the underworld's gates, lowered his heads one by one. And the souls of the dead crowded close, leaning in like reeds before a quiet, steady wind. At last Orpheus stood before Hades, ruler of the underworld, and Persephone, his queen, and he sang. He sang of his bride, of sunshine on the meadow, of laughter that sounded like wind in the pines. He sang of a love barely begun, and of a future stolen in a single careless afternoon. And he begged, not as a hero but as a broken man, for one small chance to take her home again. Persephone, queen of the dead, lowered her head and wept for the first time in 1,000 years. Hades himself turned his face away as if the music had touched something old and wounded inside him. But here is where the legend takes its cruelest turn, and you need to listen closely now. The Lord of the Dead does not give gifts for free, and every soul that returns home carries a price. Hades agreed. Eurydice would follow Orpheus back to the living world, but on one cruel condition. He must not look back at her until they had both stepped into bright sunlight. Not once, not for a heartbeat. One single glance, and she would be lost to him forever, dragged back into the shadow without a sound. Orpheus accepted, and together the two of them began the long climb back toward the world above. Now comes the hardest part of the legend, and the part where everything hangs on a single breath. The path climbed through endless dark, twisting back on itself like a wound in the heart of the earth. Whispers drifted behind him on the stale air. Was that Eurydice, or only the wind alone? Orpheus wanted to turn, wanted to see her face, wanted to take her hand just once for comfort. But the warning of Hades burned like fire in his ear. Not one look back, not one single glance. Step after step the air grew warmer, and a thin gray light began to grow somewhere ahead of them. The mouth of the cave was near, the edge of the living world, almost close enough to touch now. His heart hammered in his chest, and a quiet dread crept in like cold water into his shoes. Afraid that she had fallen behind, afraid that the god of death had tricked him, doubt bloomed like frost. And then, on the very threshold of the sun itself, with daylight only a single breath away, he turned. Oh, and here is the moment that has haunted every parent, every lover, every grieving soul for 3,000 years. Eurydice was there, 3 small steps behind him, her arms already reaching out toward his back. Her mouth was open around a word he would never hear, a final goodbye meant only for him. Her skin was already fading into gray, and the shadow was pulling at her like a rising tide. Before Orpheus could call out, she slipped back into the dark, like smoke, through open fingers. And where her feet last touched the world above, the grass withered for a full, long year. He tried to follow her back into the dark, but the way down had already closed behind him like a tomb. The boatman Charon would not row him across, and Hades himself reminded him the rule had been broken. He sat beside the mouth of the cave for 7 days, singing softly to no one but the wind. His songs that week were so mournful that the birds refused to fly, and the leaves stayed still on the trees. The trees bent low over him, as if to grieve, and the stones along the riverbed wept at midnight. But here's where the legend takes one final turn, and where every ancient source agrees on what is coming. Word reached Orpheus that a group of wild women, the Maenads, followers of the god Dionysus, were dancing on a hill. They called to him to come and play for their feast, to fill the hillside with his music once again. He refused, and for 3 long years he refused every invitation, every dance, every hand stretched out in friendship. He would not stop mourning Eurydice, and the wild followers of Dionysus could not forgive his long silence. And this is the moment the gods of Olympus decided the singer had mourned long enough to grieve forever. The Maenads, maddened by wine and the wild god of the vine, stormed the hillside where Orpheus sat alone. They struck at him, and he tried once more to sing his way to safety through the chaos around him. But the strings of his lyre broke one by one, and one by one the singer fell beneath their hands. His head, still singing, tumbled into a river, and the water carried it gently out to sea. And here's where a strange little miracle enters the legend, the part where the story begins to feel like more than a tale. The river carried his singing head far across the sea, and the ocean itself refused to silence his voice. His music drifted across the waves for days, and fishermen wept at their nets when they heard it on the wind. Even the wind forgot its name for a moment, just to listen to the saddest song the world had ever heard. His broken lyre, lying washed up on the shore, was lifted gently into the sky by Zeus himself, out of pity. And the king of the gods placed it among the stars as the constellation Lyra, the harp, so his song would never end. From that night on, the Greeks said, the sky itself carried the saddest, sweetest music ever sung by a man. Now, let us land this legend where the ancient Greeks landed it, on the quiet edge of its meaning. The myth of Orpheus is not really about the underworld, or about a magic lyre, or even about a clever ancient rule. It is about the moment grief becomes bigger than reason, and love refuses to accept the rules of the world. It is about every lover's deepest fear, that one careless look, one whispered doubt, will take everything away. For the Greeks, Orpheus was warning and comfort in a single breath, a hand held back from turning at the door. Do not rush, the myth whispers at the end. Do not doubt the people you love most in the last 10 steps of the journey. And remember, some songs are meant to be left unfinished. Their silence is part of the melody too. If this legend of Orpheus stayed with you, there is a whole constellation of stories waiting on this channel. And if you love these myths, there is a whole playlist of Greek and Norse legends queued up for you tonight. Tell me in the comments which legend I should retell next: Icarus, Persephone, the death of Balder, or Psyche and Cupid. Until then, keep one candle burning for the singer who tried, and I will see you on the next legend.